Let's go ahead and bring in Frank Isola at the Frank Isola on Twitter. You can listen to him on SiriusXM. You can watch him on ESPN, and you can read him at The Athletic. What do you think about Harold from Hollywood? Do you think he would have been upset if I'd had the President Obama on, or do you think this is just a Trump thing for him, Frank?
Well, there's two things. I want to know if Harold is upset that I'm on the air with you. That's number one. That's my biggest concern. And the second thing is I'm deciding whether or not to stay in the locker room,
yes,
to stand for your anthem, or to kneel. I haven't decided yet.
You're going to have to listen. Do you want to stay on for the final segment of the hour so you can hear the anthem that is actually played? Yeah.
I'm now teasing what I'm going to be doing, what I may or may not be doing during the anthem. So how about that?
That's a heck of a tease, too. I don't blame you. I mean, until you know how inclusive and diverse our anthem is, I think it would be suspect of you to make a decision in advance. And so we're talking to Frank. And by the way, my wife also loved Harold in Hollywood calling in. She said, does Harold in Hollywood realize he got on the show and he's upset that the president's on the show? Like, you have open phone lines and let random people who you have no idea who they are call in and share their opinions on anything under the sun. Harold in Hollywood got on the show, and he's upset that the president got on the show too, which is, kind of an interesting thing. They're both calling in on their phone. It's not like Harold didn't get an opportunity to have his opinion shared as well.
You have to ask him. You have to ask him which was his favorite New York team.
Oh yeah,
because you used to see him at Knicks games.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, what would you ask?
Yankee games.
You're a longtime New Yorker. Would you have ever believed? You probably saw the president at innumerable almost number of athletic events over the years. Whatever your opinion is of Donald Trump, he's a pretty big sports fan, right? I mean, this is a guy who would go watch games all the time in New York.
Oh, he definitely would. I mean, you used to see him. I remember one time at Knicks playoff games, there's some celebrities sit along the baseline adjacent to the Knicks bench. And I remember one time John F. Kennedy Jr. was sitting there, and I think Donald Trump was just a couple of seats down. In fact, the president used to play in like this goofy celebrity softball game at Yankee Stadium.
I actually watched one of those, Frank. When I was a kid, we went to New York, maybe once or twice when I was a kid, family vacation. And we had my mom and dad brought this up with me. They would do like a celebrity softball game. And I remember the people that I remember being there were Jason Alexander from Seinfeld, I believe, was playing. And the other one was Donald Trump. And I'm sure there were a lot of other, famous people that were out on the field. But Trump was there playing on the field at the old Yankee Stadium. I'm going to ask him about that, see what he remembers.
Well, if you notice, too, if you see Herschel Walker, you've seen Darryl Strawberry come out in support of him.
Yeah.
It's all those athletes from like the 80s into the early 90s because he was always hanging around with all the professional athletes.
That's right.
He liked being around them, so he became kind of really friendly. I think Mike Tyson would have been another one. I think if he weren't the president and if he were just coming up now, he'd be hanging out with a lot of today's athletes. He just liked being around them, owning a team, and that whole thing.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty crazy. And I was mentioning my kids earlier. The last time we had the president on, well, you guys, did I mention this to him? I jotted it down that I was going to mention it to him. But when I told my 9-year-old that the president of the United States was going to be on back in August, I said, hey, pretty cool. The president of the United States is going to be on Dad's radio show. And I swear to God, my 9-year-old's first response was, that's awesome. He knows Vince McMahon. So, I mean, he is my 9-year-old, not surprisingly, a huge WWE fan. So when I mentioned the president of the United States, the first thing he thinks is, oh, he knows Vince McMahon. And he also, obviously, the president was at a lot of those WrestleMania-like events back in the day that were always going on that were massive endeavors. All right, let's go into this is, by the way, one of the biggest weekends in the history of sports, and I'm not even exaggerating that. Today we've got the U.S. Open teeing off in New York here shortly. We have got the NBA playoffs that are officially going to be underway. The Eastern and the Western Conference Finals be playing. We've got that going on, I believe. I'm not sure Eddie can tell us the absolute latest, but we're close to concluding and having the Stanley Cup Finals underway in hockey, obviously. We've got college football rolling, and now the announcement that the Big Ten is going to be back, maybe the Pac-12, Mountain West, everybody coming back. NFL Week 2, Battle of Ohio tonight. Joe Burrow going up against Baker Mayfield. and we got the NASCAR going on at Bristol. I apologize, probably forgetting other things that are going on. I don't know that we've ever had this much to choose from ever in the history of sports.
This was the weekend that everybody was talking about.
Yeah.
Because of the U.S. Open, all the attention that'll be around that. And I mean, we just finished the tennis U.S. Open. We knew this was going to happen, Clay, didn't we?
Yeah.
Back in May and June, when it looked like sports were going to start ramping up, and then you looked at kind of this month what it would be. It's absolutely crazy. That's why I kind of like the fact that last night the NBA didn't play. Kind of got a night off, but tonight's going to be just tonight alone because you're going to have the two NBA games or the one NBA game, but you have the football game, and I believe the Islanders play tonight because I think Dallas is in the Stanley Cup Finals, not yet the other team, and you got the Open. I hate to say it because I live in New York and all we do here is complain. Now there's too many sports on.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of funny. We talked about this yesterday, and you've been covering the NBA for a long time. Can you put into context the Clippers' collapse and what it reminded you of, giving up that 3-1 series lead, all of the high expectations when Kawhi and Paul George decided to play with the Clippers? Maybe the analogy to me that made a little bit of sense was the first year that LeBron and let's see, all the Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, they all got together down in Miami, and then they lost 4-2 to the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals. That felt like a bit of a big come down relative to expectations, but they at least made the NBA Finals. Is that the best analogy you can think of for the disappointment of the Clippers? 8 in a row now they've lost when they've had a chance to advance to the conference finals. Petros Papadakis comes on the show and says they've got an Egyptian curse on them. What exactly is going on? How would you contextualize it?
That comparison to that Miami team, the only difference is, to your point, they did make it to an NBA Finals. This Clippers franchise has never been to a conference finals. Yeah. They're now 0-8 in games where they can clinch a berth in the conference finals. What bothered me a lot about the Clippers, especially in the bubble, the way that they conduct themselves, carried themselves, spoke, they were arrogant, kind of like a bully team that had behaved like they had been to the finals before and had won a couple of championships. Except for Doc Rivers and Kawhi Leonard, nobody on that team had ever accomplished anything. They were taunting Damian Lillard from the free throw line. It was Patrick Beverley and Paul George. You had Marcus Morris and Montrezl Harrell went after Luka Doncic. Patrick Beverley went after Michelle Roberts during a meeting. When she was talking, he interrupted her. She said, "Would you mind not interrupting me?" And he said back to her, "I pay your salary."
Yeah.
I'm sure Patrick Beverley would appreciate it if Steve Ballmer ever did that to him. For them to be up 3-1 in that series, and they were the biggest bully that was in that bubble, and then as that second half went on, especially in the fourth quarter, the big bully stopped competing, and they wanted to go. Remember, Lou Williams was a guy who didn't want to be there, and then when that whole thing happened a couple of weeks ago with the Milwaukee Bucks, he was one of the guys on the Clippers that were saying, "Let's go. Let's just go home." So they played like a team that did not want to be there. And LeBron and the Lakers, you saw Magic Johnson on Twitter. I've never seen someone of Magic's stature taking so much joy in the demise of another team. He was absolutely killing the Clippers. That was as bad as it gets. And for Kawhi Leonard, Mr. Load Management, who had the Clippers move heaven and earth to get Paul George to go to that franchise. How about the corner three by Paul George?
Off the side of the backboard.
Top of the backboard. Yeah. You think he was a little rattled in that game?
We're talking to Frank Isola at the Frank Isola on Twitter. Tonight, I mentioned it, the Battle of Ohio also going on. Baker Mayfield and the Browns going up against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. If you had to pick one of those two quarterbacks to have for the next 5 years, even based on the limited sample size that you've seen from Joe Burrow, who would you pick?
I would probably take Joe Burrow. I haven't been a believer in Baker Mayfield in a long time. What I liked about Joe Burrow was he had that horrible interception, in his debut. But then he marched them right down the field. And I don't know how you feel. I didn't like the call on A.J. Green. I didn't like the call on the Cowboys receiver, Gallup. I mean, to me, that was like standard operating procedure for wide receivers and defensive backs. I thought that was a really tough call. But to his credit, he drove them down the field. That should have been the winning score. At least they should have tied the game on a field goal. So I like the way that he played in his first game. His attitude, just the way that he conducts himself. Baker Mayfield, to me, just like the Browns, last offseason, they became like the big celebrity pick. So they were on the cover of magazines, and they were doing all these interviews like they were another team that acted like they had accomplished anything. They haven't done anything yet as a team. All they do is talk.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. And Odell Beckham Jr. Is evidently on the trading block now. but it's amazing how low his trade value now has gone. Maybe there's a team that feels like they're a decent wide receiver away from being able to make a real run in the playoffs. But the expectation was, the combination of Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be lightning in a bottle. They're going to be extraordinary. This is going to be a modern-day Montana Rice, Irvin Aikman. I mean, it was such a high level of expectation. And then everything, they've just fallen on their face. And Odell Beckham Jr. has been totally unproductive so far as a Brown player. And now they're trying to move on from him, which basically is a sign to me of throwing up the white flag and saying we got to go back to the drawing board and figure out what could make sense going forward. What did you think about the return of the NFL? What letter grade would you give week 1 in the NFL if you were sitting back and just looking at it from a fan perspective? As to, obviously, it's a different universe without fans present, things like that. But what letter grade would you give it?
I would probably give it around a B+ to an A. I think the fact that they didn't have preseason, and I thought everybody was sharp. I was really surprised. No, I shouldn't say I was surprised, but Tom Brady's performance I thought was pretty telling. He's now played. His last 3 games he's lost. He lost the final game of the regular season.
That's right.
He lost in the playoffs, and then he lost this game to New Orleans. And, and I thought Bruce Arians coming out and criticizing the way that he did, I actually thought that was smart. It almost tells everyone in the locker room that, I'm going to hold everybody accountable, even the best player on the team. He's got nothing to lose because where's Tom Brady going? Tom Brady now needs the Buccaneers more than they need him. So I thought that was pretty surprising, and I thought I felt good for Cam Newton. He hadn't won. I think it was his last 8 or 9 starts. He hadn't won. But isn't it interesting? They went back to the old way that Cam Newton plays, running the ball all the time. I don't know. Is that sustainable? Here's a guy that's had a lot of injuries. I mean, he's a big, he's like a battering ram. I give him credit, man. He could run dudes over, but this is what got him in trouble in the first place, getting injured. So are they going to continue to do that? But I thought overall it was good. You could tell people were excited to have the NFL back.
Yeah, look, I think the question you asked with Cam is a key one. I mean, he carried the ball 15 times for 75 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the question, I think, look, the Patriots are renting Cam Newton. They didn't commit to him long term. They have no obligations and responsibilities beyond this season, and Cam knows that. So you may see Bill Belichick use up Cam Newton to the best of his ability, and Cam's kind of got to go along with the ride because if he has a great year, he makes another $75 or $100 million potentially in his career. Either the Patriots or somebody else comes along and signs him to a long-term deal. If he doesn't, then his career is effectively over. So you talk about ceiling floor with Cam Newton. I'm not sure there's anybody out there that has a more substantial difference right now than Cam Newton in that universe.
Yeah, and I also think, too, for a couple of quarterbacks, what happened with Carson Wentz, that was not a good sign. I mean, to be up 17-0 and to lose that game.
8 sacks, got Washington destroyed. I think 13 hits they put on him. I mean, they couldn't block that offensive line.
But how about Dak Prescott, who I think he's a very good quarterback. I don't think he's great. But we spent all off season worrying about how much Dak Prescott was going to make. We talked more about his salary than I talked about my own salary. And again, he always seems to lose these games. And I think everyone is always trying to put all these players now in Patrick Mahomes' category. To me, it's like Patrick Mahomes. I'd probably put Russell Wilson in there, Aaron Rodgers. Then all these guys, to me, are below. It doesn't mean they're not bad players, including Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson got a great contract. I think he's a good quarterback. I loved him in college. I felt like he was a big-time winner. But we all want to we all think that all these quarterbacks are going to be like Patrick Mahomes. It's not even close. It's like Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. Then to me now, maybe even Breeze, and then there's a bit of a drop-off there.
Yeah, I agree with you in many ways about that, and there is a desire to try to elevate guys who haven't really proven that they're there. Dak is 1-7 in his last 8 one-possession games.
Yeah.
That's a quarterback that just hasn't gotten it done in crunch time.